One of the reasons I grow using no-dig methods is because it is absolutely brilliant for the soil. It works with the soil life to grow amazing healthy plants such as this yacon here in my orchard. It protects and nurtures the soil life, that most of which we cannot see, the tiny microscopic creatures as well as the bigger ones that we can. And this creates the perfect conditions for growing. And it also, no dig, helps the environment because it locks in carbon. If you dig, you release carbon. I've known Becky Searle for a few years now. She's a brilliant gardener, an ecologist, and has a passionate interest in soil. And when she came to visit recently, she explained some of the reasons why no-dig gardening is absolutely brilliant for soil life.
Hello, my name's Becky and I'm here in Steph Hafty's no-dig garden, and I wanted to talk a little bit about why no-dig gardening works. Now, it does what it says on the tin, in as much as you just don't dig your soil, and the idea of this is to build soil health, but a lot of people don't really understand what we mean when we say soil health. Now, the soil is a teeming ecosystem full of lots and lots of little creatures. A lot of them are just one single cell and we can't see them, but we have arthropods, things like ants and woodlice that we can see. We've got earthworms, again, that we can see. And then we've got all these things like nematodes and protozoa and bacteria and algae and just thousands, millions of little tiny lives within the soil. Now, like in any other ecosystem, it's in the interest of the things that live in that ecosystem to maintain their own environment and to work together to create an environment that they can live in themselves, that fights off the pests and diseases for them as well, so that it's a nice healthy place to live. And also, it's in their interest to maintain the health of the plants. The reason for this is that the plants pump down carbon. They make carbon as they are photosynthesizing all day long. They are producing carbohydrates, and they pump down some of this into the soil to feed the soil life. Now, the soil life needs this source of carbon in order to survive. So in a way, you can think of the soil life as sort of farming the plants in order to get this source of carbon. So we have this reciprocal arrangement between the life that lives in the soil and the plants above the soil. So it's in the interest of the life in the soil to maintain the health of the plants and a nice healthy environment for plant roots to live. So the soil life actually builds structure in the soil, because this is really important for healthy plants and healthy roots. Now, it's really important for a start that our soil doesn't get flooded, because any soil that gets flooded immediately becomes anaerobic, and anaerobic creates really, really good conditions for disease-causing microbes. So any soil that is well draining is immediately going to become hostile for these disease-causing microbes, which means it's healthier for our plants. The soil life builds structure in the soil by moving through the particles in the soil and also by aggregating the particles within the soil. So what we have is tiny, tiny particles in the soil that are just made up of bits of silt, clay, sand, and the bacteria in the soil move between these particles, and as they do, they excrete a type of sticky sugar called polysaccharides. These polysaccharides glue together the tiny, tiny particles into slightly less tiny particles, and then you have fungi, which produces another glue called glomalin, and that glue glues together the slightly less tiny particles into bigger particles. Now, as this happens, we end up with particles sticking together, but pores being created as the particles move together. And these pores are really, really important for that aeration and also for any drainage. The really, really cool thing is that when we have well aerated soil, when it rains, the water will move through the soil all the way down, and as it does so, it creates a vacuum and pulls air into the soil. So it's actually actively aerating the soil, even as it's raining or as you're watering it. The problem that we have when we dig our soil is that we can only ever dig down so far, so we may feel like we're aerating the soil, but underneath where we've dug it, if we don't have soil life actively doing what it's supposed to do, we can get compaction layers, and when the water moves down through the top layer of the soil that we've dug, it can get stuck on top of the compaction layers. And this creates just a little platform for the water to sit and create those anaerobic conditions. The other problem with digging soil is that when you do this, you disturb the soil ecosystem. You're not only actively putting things that belong under the soil on top of the soil and exposing them to conditions that they are not used to and where they can't survive, but also the sunlight, when it hits the soil, is breaking down those polysaccharides and that glomalin that sticks together the particles in the soil. So we're actually breaking apart that beautiful crumbly soil texture by digging it. And the other problem that we have is that we have to do this every year. And the problem with this is that the soil life can re-inhabit the soil really, really fast. It might move very, very slowly because most of the things that live in soil are really, really tiny, but they reproduce really, really fast. And actually you find that within a year, if you are looking after your soil and feeding it from the top with organic matter, and you have plants in the soil as well, that the soil life can build up. But the problem that we have is that people like to dig every year. And so every year you are getting this gradual build up of soil health, only to then set it back to square one. Now, the difference between digging your soil and not digging your soil is when you dig your soil, you have gradual degradation of your soil. The soil life will become less and less, and over time, your plants will become less and less healthy. Your compaction layers will become worse, and you'll have to do more work to keep your plants alive. With no-dig gardening, what you're doing is you are adding organic matter to your soil. You are feeding the life within the soil, and the life within the soil is maintaining the environment and making it better and better and better as the years go by. So what you find is that rather than having a gradual degradation of your soil is getting healthier and healthier, and every year you have to work less on keeping weeds down and keeping your plants healthy and disease free. So it's a bit of a no-brainer, really.